Well, everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at coding. And if you remember, coding is taking data and putting it into numbers or symbols or letters and so forth so that we can put it through a computer and it tabulate the results and so forth. So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at data files and some of the basics of data file technology and processes. So let's go ahead and get started today. Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and we'll finish up today with editing and coding. Now, just some basic terminology that your textbook talks about. You have a field, which is a collection of characters. It could be usually alphanumeric, but I believe they can also be numeric as well. It represents a single type of data, and that's usually a variable or included in a variable. Now, string characters is computer terminology to represent formatting a variable using a series of alphabetic characters, which are non-numeric, that may form a word. And you have an example in your textbook, and we'll take a look at that here in just a minute because it's on your slide as well. And then you have a record, which is a collection of related fields that represents the responses from one sampling unit. Now, a data file, that's the way a data set is stored electronically in spreadsheet form, in which the rows represent sampling units and the columns represent variables. And again, your textbook shows an example of it, and we'll show an example of it too as we move on. Value labels, and these are unique labels assigned to each possible numeric code for a response, such as 1 or 2 or 3 or what have you. Now, if you notice, going down in the columns, these are the variables, name, type, width, and so forth. And then you have the rows, which are characteristics of those variables. And you see here at the bottom, you see the value label screen blocking out some of this, but at the bottom you see country, and they're in a string. And as the book indicates, you can have different countries like America, Central America, South America, and so forth. That will be like subcategories, and that's what they're talking about here. And then you have the value labels, and with the 0 being no degree, 1 being an MBA, you can choose, or you can look very quickly at the number and determine whether or not the person has that degree or doesn't have that degree. And this is just, of course, the data file. These are the numeric representations on a spreadsheet. And then it talks about, of course, Walmart building a multi-petabyte data system. And a petabyte for you computer people is 1,000,000 gigabytes. And Walmart has over 800 million transactions tied to over 30 million customers each day. So Walmart's pretty busy, and they are forward thinking in as much as they are looking to be able to store and make sense of all the transactions that they are accumulating. And that's why we need the technology that we have to be able to put in some type of data form, who's buying what, when, where, and how much. Now, when it comes to code construction, there's two basic rules, and they are very important because I've experienced these firsthand. First, they should be exhaustive, meaning that a coding category should exist for all possible responses. So if you're studying, like I did, if you're wanting to study religious conversions, then you need to put down every variable that would give a clue or give an indication of what that experience is like. So you may put dissatisfaction, curiosity, whatever. You need to make sure that the categories are enough so that you cover really what it is that you're trying to study. If you're trying to study the shopping habits of male and females over 40, then you should be age, uh, race, of course, gender, and so forth. You should be as exhaustive as possible when you are looking at trying to code for categories. Also, they should be mutually exclusive and independent, meaning that there should be no overlap among the categories to ensure that a subject or response can be placed in only one category, and that's important. You don't want to confuse the issues. You need to have distinct variables. For instance, one of the variables that I had to deal with, or one of the themes or codes that I looked at, was dissatisfaction. And I had to make sure I defined dissatisfaction so that I wouldn't confuse it with something else that might be frustration. Uh, you can get frustrated but not totally dissatisfied with something. So you need to make sure that when you develop these categories, that they are so far apart and so distinct that you can tell which column goes or which variable goes into which column. If not, then you're going to compromise your research. And that is very easy to do if you're not careful, because uh, uh, if you are confusing variables, then you don't know who is feeling what or what should have gone into what category, and this, that, and the other. So make sure that you have an exhaustive listing of all the categories. And that's when I told you at the beginning of this week that when I was doing mine, I had to go to one of the big auditorium type classrooms, and I took those wall length or wall size dry erase boards, and I just started writing for every category that I could think of that would apply to my research. And then I would have to step back and say, okay, which of these categories uh, blend in, which are distinct, standalone, or what categories can I blend in that would be similar so that I'm not bleeding over or overriding another category with a variable. So that's very important. Be exhaustive, be very thorough, but also be mutually exclusive. And then a test tabulation is just taking a sample. It's taking a small sample of the total number of replies to a particular question in order to construct coding categories. So it's kind of like a microcosm or a mini attempt at taking the sample, and from that sample you can extrapolate maybe some of the larger coding categories that you're going to be dealing with. A coding scheme should not be too elaborate. No, your task, as you see here, is just summarize the data. I did not go in and overthink any of these responses. In fact, I had to discipline myself to just write down what they're saying. Uh, I didn't embellish, I didn't add to it. All I did was to make sure that what they said I wrote down and put it in that category and coded it. Categories should be sufficiently unambiguous that codes will not classify items in different ways. So, again, you want to make sure when I was looking at reasons for leaving Christianity, um, dissatisfaction, and then our dissatisfaction with the people in the Christian faith, uh, frustration over the Bible's inconsistencies. And this is what they said. I didn't say either way, whether the Bible was consistent or not consistent. but I would make it very clear that these are the reasons why these people left the faith, at least what they said was the reason why they left their faith. So you want to make sure that you are very straightforward, that you are very clear in what people are saying, and that there's no room for ambiguity. Code book, and that identifies each variable in a study and gives the variables descriptions, code names, and a position in the data matrix. That's when you've got it put all together and you've presented it. Now, data entry, there used to be a big demand for data entry operators and specialists, and that's the activity of transferring data from a research project to computers. It was done manually, and you see here at the bottom at the little picture, it looks kind of like a old-fashioned cash register or calculator maybe. But today we have optical scanning systems, and where the computers will now take that data and transfer it into a digital format and so forth. And again, as I said before, there are no shortages of companies out there who will offer their services to do that for you. There's very little that I know of manual operations going on now when it comes to data and data transferring and so forth. But again, they are very proud of their work. They can be very expensive, several $1,000s. And what I noticed, the average to be able to, well, let's just say from my transcripts, they were going to code it and come up with themes for me or categories, and it was going to cost me roughly about $3,000 to $5,000 to do that. So for those of you who are looking at getting your PhD, if you're in the market for that, there are people out there who will do it for you. If you're going to do a qualitative analysis, and that's what this is, then you can get that, but it's going to cost you. So personally, I wanted to learn it so that I would know how to do it myself. That's not to say that in the future I might not use it for another project, but at least I know how it's done so that if a company is not doing what they're supposed to do, I'll be able to detect it. And that's what I would recommend you do as well. If you're doing coding at all or qualitative analysis, which is what really this is for the most part, then I would recommend you learn it. There are several books out there that give you the basics of coding and can help you along the way. I've included that, I believe, in the bibliography. So take a look at those. And then, of course, your professors can help you as well. Dr. Thompson was a big help for me in being able to understand the dynamics of coding, what coding was all about. And we went to one of the classrooms and he gave me a demonstration of it. So don't be afraid to ask your professor or those that are knowledgeable in this field to be able to give you some help with it, to understand exactly what coding is, how important it is, and some of the rules to abide by as you're doing that type of qualitative analysis using coding. Well, everyone, as you can see, the process of taking the raw data that you got from out into the field and transferring it into something that you can use as researchable data is kind of a lengthy and complex process. Today we took a look at coding, some more basics of coding, and then data analysis and those processes that use the technology and human effort to be able to translate all of this information. So that'll get us started as we go into the next phase, which we'll start next week. But until then, you have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.